Setup. One of the first things that you'll actually do in the engineering setup menu is assign cross points. This switcher, like all modern switchers, allows you to map inputs, which means that the engineers can assign any video signal they want to the actual physical inputs, but that the operator has the flexibility to put any of those physical inputs on any button on the control panel at all. To get to the cross point assign menu, we would select Panel and select Cross Point Assign. From this subsection of the menu, I can assign any physical input to any button on the switcher, whether it's an unshifted or a shifted row. In addition to inputs on the Sony switcher, you can also map the outputs of the switcher. Each ME of the Sony switcher can send 6 different video feeds, each with configurable keyers and backgrounds. As you can see from this menu, I can select any combination of backgrounds, keys, going to any of the program outputs. Looking at it on a bank of monitors, what you're seeing here is 6 streams coming out of program preset. The full program, which shows all 4 keys. Another output shows key 1 and key 2. Then we have key 1 and 4 over the AB bus. Here's an example of key 3 and 4 over a completely different background using the utility buses of program preset. Here is a complete clean with no keys at all. And here is a composited key signal of all 4 keys minus the background. Let's move on to the copy swap menu. As you've probably figured out in your career as a TD, there are many times you need to copy one ME or a keyer or a color or something from one place to another on the switcher. First we go to the copy swap menu. That's over here. And if you see the menu, I can copy things like entire MEs, individual keys to other individual keys. I can copy the white pattern generators from one ME to another. And in fact, I can actually copy one DME channel to another DME channel. So for instance, let's copy one key to another. So here I may copy ME1, key 1, to ME2, key 1. If I simply hit copy, it now has copied that key. There's also another shortcut you can do. If I simply hold down the snapshot button, which is similar to learning a snapshot, on the ME that I want to copy from, and hit the snapshot button of the ME that I want to copy to, it performs a panel shortcut of that. There are also other panel shortcuts for keyers, wipe generators, and DME wipe generators as well. Moving on to the keyers. Every full ME on a Sony switcher has 4 keyers. On the right-hand side of the transition module are the independent key controls. These give me the ability to cut on a key or do an auto trans of some kind of a transition. With the delegate buttons towards the top, I can choose what type of transition will happen for the key. For instance, on DSK1 is currently a mix, and if I hit auto trans, it mixes. Or it can wipe, or it can even do a digital effect. The digital effect is chosen pretty much the same as the main DME wipe that we talked about earlier. If I double press this, you'll see on the menu that the DSK1 Transition DME Wipe Adjust pattern selector has popped up. So if I want something other than a slide over, I can pick it to slide down, or I can pick it to split horizontally, vertically. The actual adjustments to the keys are made from this panel. There are also menu equivalents. And before you get worried that you're going to have to press a lot of buttons, there's a button down here in the corner called Auto Delegate. Auto Delegate, when this button is turned on, anytime I punch any key button on the control panel, it will automatically change delegations so that I don't have to go hunting around the panel. Notice that as I delegated this, since program preset is obviously on the air and key 1 is turned on, I instantly get a red tally. This is a great feature on the switcher because it lets the TD know instantaneously that if I touch anything else on here, I'm going to affect what's online. As I mentioned before, wherever there's a control panel way to do something, there's usually a menu way to do something, and keyers are no exception. If we go to the menu, you can see up here that on program preset, key 1 type, I can select linear, I can select my clip and gain, so I can move these in and out, I can select key density, and all that is duplicated from the panel. Sometimes it's desirable to simply start over from scratch. For instance, on the screen right now, our key is kind of messed up, and in fact, if we actually mess it up a little more by putting some borders and maybe a matte fill and things, I don't want to have to press all these buttons to get the key back to normal. There are 2 ways to restore a key default. The first way is from the menu. On the menu, on the bottom left-hand corner of every menu, is a button called Default Recall. If I press this button, notice it becomes active by turning red, and if I press one of these buttons up here, say DSK1, it will automatically throw that key back to its default value. I can also perform the same exact operation on the key panel by holding down the switcher region and the key delegation together for 1 second, and it will beep. Let's move on to chroma keyers. As I mentioned before, every keyer on every full ME on the switcher has an ultra high quality chroma keyer as a standard feature. Let's explore that. So up here on program I have my weather map, and now I'm going to use key 1 and I'm going to bring my weatherman in. My weatherman is on top of a green screen. So we're going to turn the chroma key on. To do this, I'm going to hit key 1 to auto delegate my key panel, and I'm going to select chroma key. Notice that the key isn't exactly set up correctly, so we're going to go to the menu to adjust it. I'm going to double press this chroma key button. This calls up the chroma key menu. First thing I want to do is select this thing that says sample mark. What a sample mark will do is it calls up this target on the screen. The name of this game is to make the target as big as possible by using the knobs, position H, position V, or size, and to move this around to cover as much of the screen as possible without encroaching areas like the shadow. Now that I've got my target set where I want it to go, I'm going to hit this purple button here that says Auto Start. And in about 2 seconds, the switcher has come up with its best guess at a chroma key. Doesn't look too bad, but let's check it. If I press Show key and you look at the preview monitor, you'll see the key signal being generated by the chroma keyer. Obviously this isn't perfect, so we'll adjust it. I can adjust it in one of 2 ways. I can adjust it from the key panel. Notice that my chroma key light is lit, and over on my knobs I have C, G, H, and D. That stands for clip, gain, hue, and density. I can also do the same thing on the menu panel by touching the key active button, and notice here I have clip, gain, hue, density, and filter. I'm going to do this from the control panel. I'm going to adjust my gain just a little bit to get this back over and make sure I'm not introducing any noise into the signal. And there, that's a much better looking chroma key. As I mentioned earlier, all 4 keyers have independent transition generators in addition to the main transition generator. That means that on every ME, on every switcher, there are 5 transition generators as standard equipment. The main transition generator uses the fader bar, auto trans, or cut, and it doesn't matter what is selected up on the delegate panel. For instance, if I have a mix selected and I move this, this is using the main transition generator to the background. If I select key, it's using the main transition generator to bring the key in. If we move over to the independent key transitions, now I have background as my main. In fact, I'll select the wipe over here. In fact, let's do a split screen. Key 1, I can still cut on, I can auto transit, and it doesn't matter where in this transition. As a matter of fact, if we really get fancy, I can be moving this at the same time I'm fading this key in and out. And this applies whether I have key 1, 2, 3, or 4. Doesn't matter. Every one has an independent transition. So if we use the switcher to its fullest, I can now assign a DME to key 1, move it, have him slide out, have key 2 wipe, key 3 fade, and key 4 peel. And notice that every single one is completely independent of one another. Remember when we talked about snapshots? Snapshots, of course, remember every possible setting on the ME bank. There are times when you don't want to do that. For instance, on a key, I may want to call up a particular attribute of a key, maybe the cross point, whether it has a shadow on it, a mask, etc., without calling up the rest of the entire ME bank or going to the trouble of editing the register so that it doesn't call anything else up. We have a function on the switcher called key snapshot. Let's explore that. Each keyer has 4 key snapshots. For instance, if I have the delegate on DSK1, it's showing me that I have 4 key snapshots. If I hit DSK2, it's showing me that I have 4 key snapshots, although nothing is recorded. If we come back to DSK1 and I recall my first key snapshot that says CG1 fade, if I hit auto trans, the key fades in. Let me press my second key snapshot button, and notice here that when I press this, automatically DSK1 has defaulted itself to a DME transition. That means that it's going to do a DME transition from its off to its on state. And when I press the auto trans button, it now does a DVE effect in. Notice that as soon as I hit that button, it went back to mix. That's because I programmed the keyer to DVE on and mix off. What this feature allows you to do is add a very subtle but cool effect to your show without having to press 10 or 15 buttons to get in and out of a DVE only on one side of the key. I promised we'd talk about wipes, and now we will. The quickest way to get to the wipe menu is to double press the wipe button on the transition generator. Doing that automatically calls up the wipe menu. As a real quick overview, if you look at the very bottom, we have main pattern, pattern mix, sub pattern, edge and direction, and modifiers for both the main and the sub. If I come and select main pattern, select circle, I now have a circle wipe. If I go to sub pattern, maybe go over to enhanced, and select a star, if we turn on pattern mix, what we'll get is a morph between the main and the sub wipe. And we can do something like a non-additive mix, which gives us an Old West Sheriff's badge. So if we come over and add a border, we have a black border. We can fill with a matte. There's one other feature here called Utility 2 Bus. The Utility 2 Bus allows us to put video inside the border. Maybe make the border nice and fat. Maybe turn on soft border. And now, when I do the wipe across the screen, the Sony logo is revealed. And if we want to get even more artistic, I'll change sources on my utility bus. I happen to have one that's slightly racked focused. Now that I have this wipe set up, which took us a couple of steps to get to, I need to store it. Now, of course, that wipe and all of its parameters are stored as part of the entire ME snapshot. But just like key snapshots, I may not want to store everything just to change the wipe pattern. This leads us to Wipe Snapshot. Up on the upper left-hand corner of the FlexiPad is a button that says Wipe. Now this button is completely different from the wipe button that's part of the transition generator. This button is only memory. When I press this, well, right now I have nothing stored in here. This works just like the regular snapshot. It allows me to store all the wipe parameters. So if I look at my wipe here and I've got my Sony logo, if I hold down the wipe button, and just like a snapshot, I hit this, it's going to store that particular wipe pattern. As a matter of fact, you can see what it did is it actually put the icon of the main wipe pattern. So as I move this across, we see Sony. So now I've created another wipe here, which is another mix of two patterns, and I want to store that because I might want to use that later too. So once again, I'll come over here and hit wipe, and number 2. Notice that the icon has changed because I have a different pattern. We can also do the exact same thing with DME wipes. Remember that if I adjust the DME as a DME wipe, I can store this one by holding down DME, hitting 1, then change my pattern to something else, like this cube, store that in DME 2, and maybe change to this effect on number 3. Notice that the buttons tell me what's in them. The first button allows me to simply do the slide over. The second button says 202. What that means is that's a code for the second user wipe that I've programmed into the system. And this one is the first user wipe. So that's wipe and DME wipe snapshots. We all know how digital effects boxes work. Video comes out of the switcher, goes into the effects box manipulates it around, spins the video, what have you, and it comes out of the effects box back into the switcher. Well, up until now, the output of the effects box, or DME as we call it, would be a primary input. Well, no longer. Let's see how that works. Okay, so first off, we have our background video, and let's go ahead and add a key. This key happens to be of a nice picture of a Sony logo with some lights circling it. And normally, in order to get this into a DME, I would have to use an aux bus. In this case, 2 aux buses, because this has a key signal. On the Sony switcher, all I have to do is hit one button. What I'm actually doing is attaching a DME channel to the keyer. I'm now free to move the DVE anywhere on the screen, to manipulate it, to rotate it, anything. Now the interesting part to this is now that I've done that, If I want to change what's in the DME, all I have to do is change the key bus. Now this is very powerful because, as you can plainly see, the channel has both video and key. As a matter of fact, all the channels of DME on a Sony switcher come standard with a video and key